Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Critical Reactions with your host, Bryan. We're going to finish today with a special selection, which is where one of you tell me exactly what it is I need to check out. If you have your own song that you would like to submit for special selection, you can find a link to do so in the description below. Today's special selection comes at us from Colby. It says, check out this cool, chaotic math rock track. So that's what we're going to do today. The band is called Good Game, and the song is called Cheating the NASA Space Physical. Why do all these math rock songs have the weirdest titles? Alright, let's get into this and see what's going on.
You change your mind almost as much as you change clothes.
Ooh.
So let's settle down and figure out this situation. And we try new things to see if our bodies were paying attention. And we try new foods to see if our taste buds were paying attention. They were so acute. I don't need your diagnosis, and I don't need your extroversion to know I'm not perfect. And I'm taking it one problem at a time.
Yeah, all those harmonics here are really great at providing levity to the mood.
It's not an imbalance in hormones, but in chemistry. We never learned to balance those equations. And one day this body will fail me, perhaps a symptom of my intolerance to catalytic changes. It's all in my head, a psychosomatic chain of consequences, one might call disorder. Not afraid of will I be so joy cereals forever.
Ooh, love that tone.
I don't need your diagnosis, and I don't need your extroversion.
Yeah, so a lot of that was 4/4, but they changed it up a bit there at the end with something that I think it changed every bar. But we kept returning to a 9/8. We would do a 9/8. Maybe it was like 3 9/8 and then an oddity, right? Something that's a little longer and changes. Every fourth bar was different. So it was different from the 9/8, and it was also different from the last time we had a different time signature. Um, yeah, kind of wild. Everything's wild in this. There's so much going on. Where How? What? How do I even talk about this? All right, I think I want to start with the guitar work and the drumming work. I think they just kind of go hand in hand. Same with the bass. We're just gonna like talk about it all. Um, there's a lot of movement going on at any given time. In fact, interestingly, so last week we looked at hi-fi black metal, and I talked a lot about really enjoying cleaner production so that I can individually hear all the instruments. So I can tune into what they're doing, hear it specifically, and move on to the next instrument and kind of get this individual, look analyzing each tree to see what makes up the forest. Look at everything, then take a step back and see how it all comes together kind of vibe. And clean production helps me do that. It helps me zero in on these instruments and hear what they're doing. Um, and I kind of made the conclusion that clean production is necessary for that. And I think this band just proved me wrong. This is some clean production, and I had a real difficult time zeroing in on anything. I don't know if it was just an overstimulation of the brain, just constant sounds being fired at me. I don't know how much of it is timbre based. Both of the guitars have very strongly correlated timbres. I had a hard time, picking them apart. Um, I don't know if it's just, yeah, I don't know. Very clean production. I could hear the guitar, I could hear the bass, I could hear the drums, I could hear the three vocalists, I think, maybe two vocalists, and just like a massive range difference between their lowest note and their highest note. Um, like I could individually hear the timbres, but I was just having a real hard time visualizing what parts went to which instruments in the bass and the two guitar sections. Even the vocals sometimes overlapped into each other. Um, and it's weird because we have clean production, but it also kind of comes together into this conglomerate mess where I get hit with this wall of sound, this singular auditory idea, more so than the individual parts, no matter how hard I tried to listen to them. And I'm going to wager that this is sort of a phenomenon that occurs because this is my first time listening. I wasn't expecting this. It took me a while to even acclimate to the idea that I had all these notes being thrust at me at one time. And unlike black metal, where we typically stick on a note for a couple of hits, these guys are jumping around not just between notes themselves, where every 16th note is a different pitch, but also jumping wildly between them. We're not really working at linearly going up scales. We're sort of just bouncing all around. The notes are everywhere. Um, so in a sense, this is just as much a sonic assault as black metal was for me. And I'm thinking that on a second time I listen to this, I might be more acclimated to absorb what's being put at me. But I can talk about some of the overarching ideas, which, I mean, the chaos of it, right? Or not so much the chaos, just the speed of it, I think. We have 16th notes on the guitars all over the place, right? They're done with all sorts of tapping techniques, most likely, lots of dexterity with all of their hands, all of their fingers. I don't know. This is definitely a band I would like to see perform. I think that there would be a visual spectacle to this type of performance. Um, and it's just like it's wild how all of it comes together too. We have two guitars panned differently, playing their own ideas that are sort of rhythmically aligned. It's a lot of 16th note playing, but they're also very much so doing their own thing. And it sort of comes together into this jarbled mess. I'm going to stick with jarbled. I was going to, correct myself. It's not a mess, right? It's obviously very specifically and intricately designed to sound this way. But I think I'm going to stick with mess here. Even though it has a bit of a negativity to it, I'm going to stick with that word. I mean nothing ill against what they're doing here. But it is sort of messy to me, so I want to stick with that. It sounds to me, the two guitar parts, like what people in the 70s and 80s thought futuristic computers would sound like. All the beeps and bloops. And that's kind of what it comes together for me as. I don't really hear any strong notion of chord progression in here. And like I said, the notes are jumping all over the place. I don't really see any form, any reason or methodology between the notes themselves. When we raise, when we lower, how high we go up, how high we drop. It just seems to be a bit chaotic. And that's not to say that melodic flow and chord progression don't exist here. That's not to say that they're not playing within a chord progression or a key. I just didn't pick up on any. It could very well be sort of a hidden layer where it sounds on a surface read to be a bit more chaotic, but there is reasoning behind everything once you dig in a little deeper. I do think that this song is just a bit difficult, at least for me, to parse on a first time listen. And because of that, it ends up feeling a bit more chaotic than maybe seasoned math rock listeners or seasoned good game listeners would find it to be. So I have this noise that's sort of taking up the spotlight. I would say even when the vocals come in, they're a bit more into the mix. They're a bit under the guitars as far as uh, spotlight, as far as who's getting the most attention, right? Um, then we have the bass, and I love what the bass is doing just because it's technical, right? Um, and I don't really think there's much more I could say about that. Again, it's doing a lot of the same stuff the guitars are doing, where it kind of feels a bit chaotic at times, but I'm sure there's a reason behind all of it. I just really love hearing a bass that isn't just playing a note, holding out notes, kind of laying down the roots of the chord, and it's playing around with melody no different than the two guitars. Um, But here's where the drums come in because they are doing something similar as well. Instead of playing anything that would be foundational or standard for its instrument, so the guitars aren't doing chord or melody stuff or found or atmospheric stuff. The drums are not really doing meter stuff. They're not laying down the time signature. They're not being the metronome. They are kind of in this limbo between noise, similarly to what the guitars are doing, and melodic writing, which I love. Right, a lot of the times I use drum kits in my writing is for something more melodic. I have a real hard time writing purely rhythmic lines, especially for percussive instruments. And so to hear this in a rock context is something I absolutely adore. I bring it up every time we listen to music that does this. It's to me, it's just wonderful, right? To hear a drummer who knows how to use their drum kit outside of just rhythmically speaking. And that's not to say that there's anything wrong with writing purely rhythmic drum sections, but I'm just a huge fan of utilizing it in ways that play off of what the rest of the band is doing rather than laying down a foundational element for the rest of the band to play on top of. I don't like having that separation there. where the drums are sort of the background component. They're the metronome. They keep everyone in time. No, the drummer is an integral part of the band. They should be included in what the band is doing. And I like how that happens here. Uh, Also, mostly because they don't do the constant 16th notes that the guitars are doing. They do have some 16th note runs, but they play around a bit more with not necessarily rhythm, because you can't hold out a note on on anything on the drum kit, but no, I mean technically I guess the shimmering of a cymbal is kind of like a held out note. Kind of. That's like a gray area, right? But they don't really play around with holding out notes, but they play around more with spacing, with rest. You know, how long are you going to wait until you hit the next instrument kind of vibe. And I absolutely love how they play around with that more so than the rest of the instruments. So it allows them to be a part of the instruments, or a part of what everyone else is doing by being in the 16th note run idea, while also bringing their own aspect to the table. They're bringing their own drumness to it by implementing silence, rest against it. And it creates this underlying groove that goes against this rigid, constant 16th note attack. And it together, I think it creates a nice balance there. If the drums had gone complete 16th note style, just like the rest of the guitars were doing and the bass was doing, I think it would have been way too much. And this was already a bit overload for me. That would have been just taking it way too high for me to really have been able to get into the track as much as I did on a first time listen. Um, but then we have my favorite part of the song, and that's the vocals. It was really interesting to hear a mostly center pan vocal start with, and then we switched off to the harmonies and we separated them very starkly. We lost the vocals there in the center, and I thought that was a really nice way to go about it. We could have done the center with the harmonies on the outside and sort of separated, inner versus outside. But instead, we went for left versus right. And I think that worked well with allowing the drums to continue to shine with what they were doing. It gave them the center spotlight, but it also sort of muddied up what was going on our sides, which was already very cluttered and chaotic with the guitars doing what they're doing. So I think it worked, and a lot of that is praise to the producer. I don't know what kind of magic he worked for that, or they worked for that. Um, but it could not have been easy to have all of that sound coming from the two guitars and then to put more stuff in that space. And I think it worked. There was a nice separation between the guitars and the vocals, and like I said, the guitars I think have a bit more spotlight. They're more prominent in the mix, but the vocals can still be clearly heard. And it's just, again, that real clean production. Without it, this would have been a very muddy mess, a very different song. But the vocals bring about something that I think the song sorely needs. Personally, I'm not saying every song needs this, but for my tastes, is a bit of humanity, a bit of emotion, a bit of expressiveness. Because all of the technical aspects feel very robotic to me. And this is something that I've brought up in bands like Animals as Leaders and Meshuggah in the past. When there's a certain point where an idea becomes overly technical in my ears, that it loses a bit of the soul of the music. It becomes more technically impressive than musically impressive. And again, I don't want to say that one way is better than the other. It really depends on what kind of music, what kind of art people want to put into the world, and what kind of art people want to listen to when they're, deciding on what music they want to put on. But for me personally, I really enjoy technical music. I think I've expressed that multiple times in the past. I've given lots of praise to technical performances, even if they're not necessarily my jam. There is definitely a spectacle to watching something like this performed, regardless of what band or genre it is. Something about seeing the human body pushed to its limits to create art is phenomenal in itself. Definitely one of the highlights of Colin Stetson's track, The Love It Took to Leave You, I think is what it was called. Phenomenal song. And, I really enjoyed listening to that, and check out the reaction to that right there. But here, it kind of reaches the point where it's almost too technical. Or I don't I don't know if that's the way to, because I don't know if it's a balancing act. I don't know if there's a point where it becomes too technical to have that soul, the humanity aspect. But I think it becomes more difficult to balance the more technical it becomes. And I think this started to move into the area where I enjoyed the performative aspect of it, but musically it just wasn't there for me. It wasn't really holding me there. But the vocals came in and they provided that humanity, that soul, that oomph that I think the song needed to kind of pull it back from the cold robotic element that it was sort of sitting in, and kind of bring it back to the artistic side. Man, I'm really trying to dance around this and not be too negative about it because I don't want my biases coming into my language here. But I think my intent is getting across, and I hope everyone understands. I mean, no, I mean, I'm tossing no shade here, right? Um, but the vocals come in, and first of all, we have extreme counterpoint to the fast playing that we have everywhere else. There is more notes being held out here for longer periods of time. And instead of bouncing around between all these notes where the two guitars are barely getting any points of dyadic movement going on, we do have these very strong dyads being created through these two vocals here. And a dyad is just a two-note chord, right? Um, so we have these slower moving parts where you can really focus on the emotion of the note relationships here, right? The two notes, depending on how far apart they are, they're going to have different emotions tied to them. And when we move between these notes so fast, the emotional aspect is really kind of stripped away. We don't have time to reside in that feeling before the next two note dyad comes into play. And that's what's happening in the guitars. When the vocals do it, though, they sit in these and they let us really feel what these dyads are doing, the emotions that they're injecting into the song. And I feel like it's so necessary for my personal enjoyment of the track to hear a bit more of this relatable aspect where I can feel the emotion rather than just be stunned by the spectacle. And it's a really great balancing act here between having the more mechanical, technical aspect and something that allows the emotion to be felt, right? And that's not to say technical aspects can't bring emotion to the equation. They do have their own emotions that I think they work better with. But at least for me, it's more difficult to vibe with them because they jump around the emotional impact very quickly, and it more difficult for me to engage with it. So we have these vocal lines that bring in this extra element that I think, and they also do something else interesting though as well in that they are not always going all the time. The guitars rarely stop until the bridge, I think it was close to the end when we heard those really nice harmonic hits. Loved those. I thought it was a really nice moment of levity in the song where everything else is sort of um, aggressively being thrust at me. There's just a lot of notes being thrown in my face, and here we had a little bit of levity. We cut the notes back, we cut the volume back, we even muted this. I mean, that was part of the harmonic bit, is that some of these end up being a bit more muted, and it's levity in a lot of different areas of the song. Um, but aside from this small section, the guitars are just constantly going, and the vocals sometimes they're together and they also take breaks. They'll do a one bar sentence and then take a one bar break and then do the next sentence. And sometimes we'll hear only one side. Sometimes we'll hear the other side. Sometimes they'll both start and one will quit out after two words. And it feels like a dance, right? We have this nice ebb and flow of who's saying what, who's singing what kind of emotions they're bringing to the table with their dyads. And they're moving in different directions too. It's not like they're always the same space apart when they change their notes. They they change the direction. Maybe one will go up in pitch and one will go down, and it widens the gap between them, which has a different emotional vibe than if it was five half steps apart. So it's really nice that they're providing all of this extra. I guess what I'm trying to say here is chordal structure, right? And I had mentioned that earlier, that I didn't really sense a strong chordal aspect to the guitar work. And that's not to say there isn't one. Like I mentioned earlier, they are playing notes. If I wrote all the notes down, it would tell me what key we're in. But being that we move around them so fast, it doesn't really give a strong sense of chordal structure. And that's what the vocals are laying down here. And chords are sort of the backbone of the emotional aspect of a song. And that's probably why I gravitate so much to the vocals in this track. They're providing me that emotional aspect. And I think that's all I want to talk about there. Because the song, I mean, it's interesting. It's linearly written. I don't feel like we repeat sections. I didn't really notice any repetitions uh, throughout, but I also felt, at least in the guitar and drum work, that it's a lot of the same thing. And maybe there are evolutions in what they're playing that I missed just because it's moving so fast and I was really having a hard time picking up landmarks. But it felt like we were in this chaotic moment for a very long time. And then we had the harmonic section and then our outro. So we have a linear section that sort of sits within this one idea for quite some time. Whereas the vocals, they kind of do whatever they want. It's linear as well, but they didn't seem to necessarily go along with what the guitars were doing. They would kind of feel like they had their own mini sections, right? We don't care what the guitar is doing. The rest of the band has this huge section and then two small sections. We're just going to have a bunch of small sections back to back, and they're all going to be different. And in that way, it feels interesting. Well, at least I find it more interesting to listen to the vocals because they feel like they're constantly evolving, whereas the music feels rather stationary or static. And like I said, that could just be because I have a hard time picking up landmarks in such fast paced music. It could be that there was a lot of variety in the guitar work that I just didn't pick up on. So, let's dive into the lyrics here and see if we can't find anything along these lines of sporadic chaos, and division between elements. Like I said, the vocals are kind of doing their own thing. The music's kind of doing their own thing. One's moving at a different pace than the other. Yeah. So what we got here? Oh, this is vastly different than the hip hop we've been looking at. We got a whole, 20 lines here, tops? You change your mind almost as much as you change your clothes, so let's settle down and figure out this situation. And I feel like that's pretty on point, but I'm curious what the situation is. Uh, we try new things to see if our bodies were paying attention. We try new foods to see if our taste buds were paying attention. They were so acute. I don't need your diagnosis and I don't need your extroversion to know I'm not perfect. And I'm taking this one problem at a time. It's not an imbalance in hormones, but in chemistry. We never learn to balance those equations. So, this is just a breakup song, right? Am I missing something here? I mean, I think I'm missing something here, but I don't know if I am. One person says you change your mind as much as you change your clothes. So you're always changing your mind about things. So let's talk this out, right? And then later on, someone says, I don't need your diagnosis. You don't have to tell me I'm imperfect. I know I'm imperfect. He says, and I'm not taking this one problem at a time. So basically says that, we're not going to go through this bullet point by bullet point, everything that I don't like about you or everything you don't like about me. It says it's not an imbalance in hormones, it's an imbalance in chemistry. So the two of us aren't working. It says we never learn to balance those equations, bringing it back to the chemistry idea instead of talking, or the metaphor of chemistry between people, but then also chemistry, the science. And then repeats the idea, I don't need your diagnosis, I don't need your extroversion. Yeah, so it sounds like somebody or two people, possibly, there was a male and a female vocalist, and I wonder which lines pertain to which vocalist. Maybe that gives some insight into the fact that this might be more of a conversation rather than uh, a one-sided display of thoughts, right? One-sided telling of a story. But it seems like one person is possibly upset that the other is not what they want them to be. And the other one says, yeah, that's fine. I'm not perfect. You don't need to tell me that. We just don't work together, right? We don't work together well. And I don't need to go down the line to tell you why. We already know, right? We never learned to figure out how to make this work. And that seems to be the whole song to me. I don't know about this thing about trying new things and new foods to see if our bodies and taste buds are paying attention. Maybe that's maybe that's saying that we tried switching things up, right? We tried new ways to make it work. And it says they were so acute. Obviously that means they didn't work, but I'm not quite figuring out how that works in there. Maybe there's another another definition for acute. I'm thinking of a small angle, so a small amount. Maybe it just says that the things they tried weren't big enough to make the change. But yeah, that's what it seems to be about. Two people who have grown apart and they tried to make it work and it didn't, and they're just saying, you know what? That is how it is, right? We gave it a shot. We tried to balance the equations, and it just never worked. Now, what any of that has to do with the music, I don't know. There is a bit of a balance in the music, right? Between all the chaos in the instruments and sort of the slower paced element in the vocals. There's also the back and forth in the two vocalists, which I liked. Like I said, I'm curious if they specifically gave one or another vocalist specific lines to maybe tell two people talking back and forth kind of vibe. But it just seems like a song that they're good at writing, math rock, and the vocalist came up with, or the lyricist came up with these vocals, and you just smash them together. I don't really see any strong relationship between the musical themes and the lyrical ones. So, walking away from this, how do I feel? I'm going to check out more Good Game. Math rock is a hard one for me to get into. We checked out mathcore. We've checked out math rock before. It's I don't know. There's something about the genre. I love the technicality in it, but I rarely get grabbed. And like I said, the vocals here are working for me. So I think I'm going to check out the rest of this album called Swish in asterisks, which makes me think that it's just an action. It's like when you make a swish. Um, there's only 8 tracks, so I can't imagine it's a very long. One of the songs, track 5 to be accurate, is Jackie Chan, A Plan, a Canal, Panama. And of course, that's a callback to somebody? Oh, Fall of Troy, which we have done before. In fact, we did the song A Man, A Plan, a Canal, Panama. But this time, a man has been replaced with Jackie Chan, which breaks the palindrome. I don't know these guys, man. I'm gonna have to look at track 3 is Admiral Crunch versus Archduke Chocula. Yeah, I think I'm gonna have to check these guys out. Just see what's going on. I'm not sure I'm gonna walk away from it in love with it or having a renewed interest in math rock, but I've got to give it a chance. Like I said, I think this is the closest to really enjoying a math rock song casually that I've come since I've been introduced to the genre. So, those are my thoughts on Good Game's Cheating the NASA Space Physical, which, I have no idea how the title relates to it, but I think that's just math rock being math rock, just random song titles. Let me know what you guys thought of this. Hit me up in the comments. Give me your interpretation. Let me know if I missed anything. And I was kind of negative on it, a little harsh on it. Let me know if you guys think I'm in the wrong, right? Maybe there's something I missed that would have helped me understand it. Maybe it's just not my cup of tea either. I don't know. Above that, if you want, check out the description box. We got a link for Linktree in there. It takes you to this menu right here. Has everything related to the channel. You can find links to merch, Twitter, Discord, Patreon, bunch of stuff. Go check it out. I don't know why I did that little rhythmic thing. Also, like, subscribe, and ring the bell. Those are located above the description box. All three of those greatly help out the channel. All right, that wraps it up for today. I'll be back tomorrow, 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 9 p.m. UTC. We're going to look at some more hip hop and another special selection. Until next time, remember to be critical but not cynical of the music you listen to, and have a fantastic morning, afternoon, or evening whenever you choose to watch my videos.